What we decide to do with our justice system will determine what is left of this great nation. Joining us are attorney and former New York Congressman Lee Zeldin and Heritage Foundation Vice President Roger Severino. Roger, forgive me, my favoritism is going to come through. I have to start with my old colleague Lee Zeldin. Congressman, I thought the verdict was about what you would expect with a vague indictment, a pro-prosecution judge, and a pro-prosecution set of jury instructions. I mean, that all kind of leads to a guilty verdict.
Right. When President Biden's referring to this as not being happy with the verdict, and that's why people are calling it rigged. The fact is, we have been critical of this process throughout, long before the jury first had an opportunity to weigh in on the case that was before it. Alvin Bragg campaigned on a pledge to take down President Trump. And he comes in on his day one memo, as you were referencing, in a way about how he would refuse to prosecute crimes across the board, other felonies treated as misdemeanors. And you take a case that was declined by the Department of Justice, declined by the FEC, declined by Cy Vance, Alvin Bragg's predecessor. You have a judge on this case who is somehow the same judge on a Trump Organization case, the Weisselberg case, the Bannon case, as if he is the only judge in New York. Jury instructions really trying to drive the jury towards one option and one option only, and that is to find President Trump guilty. That's why people have been saying this whole process has been rigged throughout, is that this description that I just provide is actually just beginning to scratch the surface.
Roger, the Speaker of the House is a pretty good lawyer in his own right, in his spare time. Let's listen to what he had to say.
I do believe the Supreme Court should step in. Obviously, this is totally unprecedented, and it's dangerous to our system. I think that the justices on the court, I know many of them personally, I think they're deeply concerned about that as we are. So I think they'll set this straight. This will be overturned, guys. There's no question about it. It's just going to take some time to do it.
Roger, Micah's a really smart guy, but I'd be surprised if the U.S. Supreme Court stepped in. I mean, I think there is going to be a sentencing in July. I think there's going to be a state court appeal. I think this is going to be an issue in November, but let's assume I'm wrong about all of that. What are the best issues on appeal from your standpoint, both from a U.S. Supreme Court standpoint and from a state of New York standpoint?
Sure. If you don't like the phrase rigged, how about railroaded? President Trump was railroaded because this judge had these jury instructions that said you could choose your own adventure. You have 3 potential options as to how you could convict President Trump, and you don't have to be unanimous as to which one of those counts it is. That violates the Due Process Clause. That violates the Sixth Amendment. You have to be able to be confronted by the charges so you could defend yourself. It could have been four jurors on one count, 4 on another, 4 on another. That's not how you run a justice system. So if President Trump is actually put in jail, there's something called a habeas petition. You could go straight to federal court. If it goes to federal court, it could go more quickly, and it could actually go to the Supreme Court. So it's either under a habeas petition or under due process or under Sixth Amendment. If it goes quickly, it will go to the Supreme Court, and I agree. I think this is on the road to reversal, which means it was all about politics from the beginning. It wasn't about justice. It wasn't about law. It was about trying to interfere with an election through the courts instead of the ballot box.
You know, I was actually in the courtroom or the overflow room for 4 days. I was a prosecutor. I know what pro-prosecution judges sound like and look like and rule like. I have never seen a judge this pro-prosecution. Lee, there's a temptation to want to take an eye for an eye. I mean, that's just human nature. There's a temptation to do to them as they may have done to us. So how do Republicans fight back without turning our justice system into just another political weapon depending on who has power?
Well, first thing is making sure that we're settling a score at the ballot box. I mean, this is election interference. This is meant to lock up President Biden's chief political opponent, bankrupt President Trump and his family, and in some of these cases, remove him altogether from the ballot so that voters can't even pick their next president for them. So for anyone who wakes up the day after this verdict comes out and they're motivated, more motivated than ever, to do something about this, well, then get active. And we saw with tens of millions of dollars raised in the first 24 hours for President Trump. People can sign up and volunteer, and we need to make sure that these people are not rewarded with more power. So for Americans out there who are upset with what has happened, it is important to make your voice heard by talking about this case while you're talking about all the other issues that matter to you, and ultimately voting and maybe even volunteering or donating $5 along the way.
Roger, I do not Monday morning quarterback. Being a trial lawyer is a very tough job. But I will ask you, was there a defense that could have led to a different verdict or a hung jury? I mean, it is very hard to run for office and also be a criminal defendant. But was there a theory that you think could have worked in hindsight?
I really don't think so. I predicted that there was going to be a conviction. You had a politicized prosecutor with a politicized judge with a politicized jury pool in Manhattan. I mean, come on. We knew what was going to happen from the beginning. There's not much that could have been done. Maybe they could have objected a bit more in the closing arguments. The judge allowed the prosecution to allege that there were these election crimes, that the conviction of Cohen matters to whether or not Trump did it. And there are all these other little errors. The defense did a very good job, but the deck was stacked against them. That's from the beginning. They were out to get Trump, and they got him at this stage.
I tell you what, it is hard to object when you never win, because the jury thinks you're trying to keep stuff from them, and it's a horrible look. So I would have sat on my hands, too, because every time they objected, it was overruled. Lee Zeldin, Roger Severino, thank you so much. I have a sneaking suspicion the three of us will be back together at some point, continuing this conversation. Thank you for joining us on a Sunday night.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.